Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are doing something a little different. Usually we look at a topic from, 30,000 feet. But today we are zooming all the way in.
All the way.
Down to the molecular level of the threads in your jacket, and then zooming all the way back out to the massive global infrastructure being built to track them. We're talking about the intersection of high fashion, hardcore cryptography, and international law.
It is a fascinating collision. You rarely see code, clothes, and compliance crash into each other this hard.
Exactly. And to kick this off, I want to start with a feeling that I think everyone listening has had at some point.
Okay.
You're on a resale site, maybe it's StockX, maybe it's The Real, or maybe it's just eBay. And you see the item, it's that grail piece, a limited run jacket, or maybe a vintage handbag.
The one you've been searching for.
Yes. And the price is just accessible enough. You hesitate for a second, then you click buy. But then for the next 5 days while you wait for shipping, you have that little pit in your stomach.
Yes. The anxiety of authenticity.
Is it real? It just eats at you.
And you start looking at grainy photos, comparing the stitching to pictures online. It's a whole process.
It's a whole process. And it's not an irrational fear. I was looking at the numbers from our source stack today, and there is one statistic that just completely floored me.
That's that.
The global counterfeit market is estimated to be worth nearly $500 billion annually.
It's an astronomical number. I mean, it's hard to even get your head around a number that big.
$500 billion.
To put that in perspective, that is larger than the GDP of roughly 80% of the countries on Earth. It's not a black market, it's a parallel economy.
A parallel economy. I mean, we aren't just talking about a guy selling knockoff Oakleys on a beach blanket anymore. This is industrial scale fraud.
No, absolutely. Sophisticated networks, global logistics, everything.
And it connects to the core problem we're unpacking today. In the physical world, we have absolutely no reliable way to verify the history of an object.
Right.
If I hand you a sustainable, recycled polyester jacket, you just have to take my word for it. There's no proof.
Currently, yes. We rely on proxies for trust. We rely on a sewn-in label, which, can be cut off or faked.
Glizzily.
We rely on a paper hang tag, which can be printed by anyone with a decent inkjet printer. Or we rely on a paper certificate of authenticity.
Right, the fancy card with the gold foil.
Which, ironically, is often easier to forge than the product itself.
That's the wild part. We have all this technology. We can track a pizza delivery driver turn by turn to our doorstep, but we have no idea if the organic cotton in our shirt is actually organic.
Or if the Italian leather bag was actually stitched in a sweatshop and just, had the final zipper put on in Italy to get the label.
And that is exactly where the Digital Product Passport, or DPP, enters the frame.
The DPP.
Digital Product Passport. It sounds incredibly bureaucratic, I have to admit. It sounds like something you'd have to wait in line at the post office for.
Yeah, it does have that ring to it.
But as we went through the research on this, specifically looking at the Hoken tech approach and the regulatory landscape, this feels less like bureaucracy and more like the Internet of Things finally growing up.
I think that's a fair assessment. The term passport is a useful metaphor, but it's actually a bit limiting in some ways.
How so?
When we talk about a DPP, we are really talking about giving a physical object a unique digital identity, a digital twin that lives on the blockchain and records the life story of that object in real time.
A digital twin. I like that better.
It's more dynamic.
So let's set the table here. Our mission today is to move past the buzzwords. We are going to see a lot of blockchain and NFTs in these notes, but we aren't talking about bored apes or speculation.
No, this is pure utility.
We're talking about supply chain plumbing. We're going to break down what a DPP actually is, why the fashion industry is kind of the patient zero for this tech, the specific way companies like Hoken Tech are building it, and then the massive regulatory wave coming out of the EU that is going to force every brand to do this, whether they like it or not.
And that regulatory wave is the key. You're right. This isn't just a tech trend that a company can choose to adopt. It's becoming the law, the cost of doing business.
So let's unpack this concept, Section 1. What is a digital product passport, really? Because when I hear passport, I think of a static booklet. I get a stamp in it, I move on. Is that what this is?
It's similar in principle, but dynamic in practice. Think of your physical passport. It proves you are who you say you are, and it shows where you've been. A DPP does that for a product, but it goes much, much deeper.
Okay.
It provides complete up-to-date life cycle information. It doesn't just say, this is a coat. It says, this is a coat, model number 7B, made of these specific materials, which were sourced from these specific farms, stitched in this specific factory on this date, shipped on this vessel, sold on this date, and then repaired on this date.
It's the biography of the object.
Exactly. And based on the sources we have, specifically looking at the data models, a robust DPP covers huge amounts of territory.
Like, what kind of data points are we talking about?
Okay, so first you have the manufacturing and supply chain milestones, literally the timestamps of creation.
So, cotton harvested on this date,
Yeah.
fabric woven on that date.
Precisely. Then you have material composition, which is absolutely critical.
Why is the material composition so critical? I mean, I can read 50% cotton, 50% polyester on a label. What more do I need?
You can, but is it accurate? And more importantly, is it detailed enough for a recycler? Polyester is a really broad term. There are hundreds of chemical variations.
Ah, I never thought of that.
If you want to recycle a garment effectively, you need to know the exact chemical makeup, the dyes used, any coatings applied. A DPP holds that molecular level detail that won't fit on a tiny nylon tag sewn into the seam.
That makes sense. I guess I never thought about the fact that recycling isn't magic, it's chemistry. You need to know the ingredients to do the chemistry right.
Precisely. You can't unbake a cake if you don't know what's in it. Then you have certifications and compliance docs.
Okay, so this is the prove it part.
This is the prove it part. If a brand claims a shirt is fair trade certified, the DPP doesn't just say fair trade. It contains a direct, verifiable link to the actual digital certificate issued by the auditor with the auditor's digital signature.
Wow. So you can click through and see the primary source document.
You can. And then there's ownership and custody events.
This is the part that feels like a real shift in how we own things. If I buy a high-end bag, the DPP transfers to me, like to my phone.
Ideally, yes. It's a digital handshake. The brand or retailer initiates a transfer of the product's title, its digital twin, to your digital wallet. Now you are the registered owner.
So if it gets stolen, I can flag the digital passport as stolen.
You could, which would make it much harder for someone to resell it on a legitimate platform that checks the passport status.
And if I want to resell it myself,
You can prove you're the legitimate owner, and you can transfer the full verified history of the item to the next buyer. It adds tremendous value.
it's like the title deed to a car, but for a handbag.
Or a watch, or a jacket, or a piece of art. It changes the object from an anonymous commodity into a registered, verifiable asset.
Okay. But here's the question I always have when we talk about this kind of mandatory tech adoption.
Yeah.
The sources list 4 pressures driving this. Why now? I mean, we've had counterfeits forever. We've had supply chain issues forever. Why is this tipping point happening right now?
It's a convergence. It's a perfect storm of 4 distinct crises hitting at the same time.
Okay, lay them out for me.
The first one, which we open with, is anti-counterfeiting. Brands are just bleeding money. But it's not just the lost revenue. It's brand dilution.
What do you mean by that?
If you buy a luxury bag and the handle snaps in 2 weeks because it's a fake, you don't blame the counterfeiter, you blame the brand because you thought it was real.
That's true. I'm not going to hunt down the unauthorized factory. I'm going to go on Twitter and tag the brand and say their quality has tanked.
Exactly, and that erodes trust over time. So brands are desperate for a way to lock down authenticity that can't be easily copied. You can copy a hologram sticker. You can't copy a blockchain entry.
Okay, that's pressure 1. The money. What's 2?
Pressure 2 is regulatory compliance. We'll get into the specific alphabet soup of laws later, but simply put, governments, especially in the EU, are done asking nicely. They are demanding proof of claims.
The era of trust us, we're sustainable is over.
Completely over, it's now show us the data, and the penalties for not showing it are getting serious.
Right. So you have the law coming down. What's pressure 3?
Pressure 3 is sustainability and circularity. This is being driven by the consumer side. People, especially younger consumers, want to participate in the resale economy, the circular economy.
They want to buy used, they want to repair things.
Yes, but you can't have a high-functioning resale market if 30% of the goods are fake, or if you can't properly identify what the item is made of to repair or recycle it.
It's the classic lemon market problem from economics, isn't it? If you can't trust the quality of the used goods, the whole market degrades because no one wants to pay a fair price.
Spot on. The DPP injects that trust back into the system. And the fourth pressure is one that consumers don't see, but it keeps COOs up at night. Operational efficiency and this problem of data silos.
Data silos, the classic corporate villain.
It sounds boring and technical, but it's incredibly expensive. Picture this. A brand has a sustainability director in London, a sourcing manager in Hong Kong, a factory in Vietnam, and a logistics partner in Singapore.
A typical global setup.
The sustainability director needs to know if the zippers used in the fall 2025 collection are compliant with a new EU chemical law. Currently, that involves a chain of emails, hunting for PDFs, chasing people down, checking spreadsheets. It's chaos.
And I assume half the time the PDF is lost, or it's the wrong version from 2 years ago, or the factory just sends a screenshot of a text message as proof.
You're not wrong. It is Excel hell, as one source put it. A DPP creates a single interoperable source of truth. The director in London doesn't email the factory. She queries the product passport for that collection. Boom, there's the certificate.
And that must save a huge amount of money.
It slashes reconciliation costs. So even if a brand doesn't care one bit about the environment, they care about not spending millions of dollars a year chasing paperwork.
So you have the CFO wanting to save money on operations, the marketing team wanting to stop fakes, the legal team terrified of the EU, and the sustainability team wanting to actually enable recycling. It really is a pincer movement from every department.
That's why we call it a mandatory in practice shift. Even if the law doesn't explicitly force your hand today, the business case is so overwhelming that it's forcing it anyway.
Okay, so let's pivot to the specific industry here. The sources we have, especially the Hoken tech material, are heavily focused on fashion and textiles. Why fashion? Why aren't we doing this for, say, toaster ovens or garden hoses first?
Fashion is the perfect storm. The source material highlights 4 factors that make textiles uniquely difficult to manage without digital tools like a DPP.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, as we've said, high fraud exposure. Nobody's going to the trouble of counterfeiting a $20 toaster. It's not worth the effort. But a $500 sneaker or a $2,000 handbag, that is a prime target.
Hype culture drives fraud. The more exclusive and desirable something is, the more incentive there is to fake it.
Exactly. So that's factor 1. Second is high life cycle variability. This is a fancy way of saying clothes live interesting and complicated lives.
Right. A toaster sits on a counter until it breaks and you throw it out.
Pretty much. But a coat gets worn, washed 100 times, stained, maybe repaired, altered, eventually sold on Depop, then donated to Goodwill, then shipped in a bale to a sorting facility in another country, and maybe, just maybe, recycled.
It's like trying to track a dollar bill through the economy. It just changes hands constantly.
And at every single one of those handoffs, information is lost. By the time it hits the vintage store, nobody has any idea who made it or what it's really made of. The DPP acts as a digital tether that travels with the item through that whole chaotic journey.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the third factor?
Material complexity. We touched on this, but it's worth reiterating because it's so important for circularity. The source calls it material mix opacity.
Opacity. I like that. It's cloudy.
It is. Fashion loves blends. A modern technical jacket might be a nylon shell with a polyester lining, goose-down insulation, plastic buttons, metal zippers, Velcro cuffs, and a PFC-based water-repellent chemical coating.
To the naked eye, it's just a jacket.
To a recycler, it is a contaminant bomb.
Because you can't just melt down nylon and polyester together in the same vat.
Correct. They have different chemical properties, different melting points.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't separate them meticulously, you get a useless, low-grade sludge. Without a DPP telling you exactly what those materials are and where they are located in the garment, mechanical recycling is basically impossible.
So the DPP is like a disassembly manual for the product at its end of life?
That's a perfect analogy. And the fourth factor,
That's number 4.
sensitive claims. The fashion industry, more than almost any other, is addicted to adjectives: organic, ethical, carbon neutral, vegan, ocean-bound plastic.
These are powerful marketing terms. They make you feel good about buying something.
They're marketing gold. But they are also legally dangerous if you can't prove them. Greenwashing litigation is exploding. Regulators and consumers are calling brands out. So brands need the DPP to provide the evidentiary backing for their marketing adjectives.
So if you put sustainable on the tag, the DPP is the bibliography proving it. It's the works cited page for your jacket.
Exactly. It shifts the entire dynamic from believe our marketing to verify our evidence.
I love the list of consumer questions the source provides. It really boils it all down to what a normal person wants to know.
It's very practical.
Is this authentic? What is it made of, really? Where did it come from? How should I care for it? And can I resell it? If a brand can answer those 5 things instantly with a scan of a phone, that is a massive competitive advantage.
It empowers the consumer. It stops us from being passive recipients of a product and turns us into informed custodians of these objects. It changes the relationship.
Okay, we skirted around the technical how long enough. We need to get into the engine room.
The nuts and bolts.
The source material highlights the Hoken tech approach, and it uses two technologies that, I'll be honest, usually make my eyes roll back in my head. Blockchain and NFTs.
The cuckles. I know. The crypto bro stigma is strong.
It really is. When I hear NFT, my brain immediately goes to overpriced JPEGs of monkeys or pixelated punks that lost 90% of their value. But the source material is adamant that we need to look past the hype. So, help us out here. Why are we using NFTs for a supply chain tool? What is the actual utility?
It's a great question, and it's the right one to ask. We have to strip away the speculative financial layer that gave NFTs their reputation and look at the tech primitives.
The basic function.
The basic function.
Yeah.
In the Hoken tech model, an NFT, a non-fungible token, is functioning strictly as a unique digital identifier. Nothing more.
So it's not the artwork, it's not a picture of the jacket.
No, think of the NFT as the anchor. It is a digital container with a unique serial number that, by the laws of the code, cannot be duplicated. That's the non-fungible part.
Okay, so it's one of a kind.
It's provably one of a kind. In the physical world, I can print two identical shipping labels with the same barcode. The scanner at the warehouse won't know the difference. On a blockchain, I physically cannot create two identical tokens with the same ID. The protocol itself prevents it.
So the NFT is the unique key that corresponds to the unique physical object, or maybe a batch of objects.
Correct. It is the bridge between the physical and the digital. You link the physical item via a QR code or an embedded NFC chip to this unique digital token. And because a token lives on a blockchain, it inherits all the special properties of the blockchain.
Which brings us to the other buzzword, blockchain. Why do we need a blockchain? Why can't the brand just keep a database? Nike School Database, final version 2, for real this time.
That is the crucial question. Why not just a centralized database run by the brand? The answer comes down to two words: trust and immutability.
Okay, break this down.
If a brand keeps the database, they are the super user. They control the history, they can edit it, they can delete it. If a scandal breaks, say, turns out a factory they used was employing child labor, the brand could, theoretically, go into their private database and delete the records linking their products to that factory.
They could scrub the history to save their reputation.
They could. Or a hacker could get in and change the data. But on a public or a permissioned decentralized blockchain, the record is immutable. Once an entry is made, batch 123 was made in factory X on date Y. It is cryptographically sealed into a block and chained to the previous one. You cannot delete it. You cannot change the timestamp.
So it forces a certain kind of honesty because you can't rewrite the past to suit the present.
It creates a permanent, tamper-resistant audit trail. It also solves the decentralization problem we talked about. Remember our data silos.
Right, everyone has their own spreadsheet.
Supply chains involve hundreds of different companies: suppliers, logistics firms, auditors, brands, retailers. They don't all trust each other, and they certainly don't all want to use Nike's internal database. A blockchain provides a neutral ground. It's a shared ledger that no single company owns or controls.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like a digital Switzerland. It's a neutral territory where everyone can agree to store the truth without one person being in charge of it.
That's a great way to think about it.
But, and I have to play the skeptic here, because this is where my brain always gets stuck, does the blockchain magically make the data true?
Yes.
Let's say I'm a shady factory owner. I'm using standard pesticide-heavy cotton, not organic, but I log into the system and I type, "This is 100% GOTS certified organic cotton," and I upload a photoshopped PDF. The blockchain records that entry forever. Isn't it just an immutable lie?
You have hit on the single most important nuance in this entire conversation. It's often called the oracle problem, or more simply, garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
And the source material is very honest about this. The blockchain does not verify the truth of the physical world. It cannot smell the cotton and check for pesticides. It only verifies that the data hasn't been changed since it was entered.
So it proves I said it, but it doesn't prove what I said is true.
Right. It guarantees the integrity of the record, not the integrity of the cotton itself. However, and this is a big however, this is where the human governance layer comes in. The Hoken tech notes emphasize governance. You don't just let anyone with an internet connection write to the product passport. You have authorized signers.
Well, it's not a free-for-all. It's permissioned, like digital notaries.
Exactly like digital notaries. The brand might only authorize an independent third-party auditor like SGS or Intertech to be the one who can sign the organic certification on-chain.
Ah, I see.
So now, if there is a lie on the chain, we know exactly whose digital signature is attached to that lie. We can trace the point of failure back to a specific trusted entity.
So you can't totally prevent the lie, but you make the liar incredibly accountable for it. The stakes for lying become much, much higher.
Accountability is the product. You are creating a system where lying leaves a permanent public fingerprint.
The sources also mention smart contracts. How do those fit into this picture? Are they actual legal contracts?
It's a slightly confusing name. They're not legal contracts in the traditional sense. They are software scripts that live on the blockchain. Basically, if this, then that statements.
Okay, so code.
Simple, automated code. In a supply chain, they are incredibly useful for automation and compliance. You could write a smart contract that says, if the chemical safety certificate is not uploaded by the time the shipment's left the factory status is triggered, then automatically flag this entire batch as non-compliant and do not release payment to the supplier.
Oh, wow. So it automates the policing of the process? You don't need a human to check the box?
It creates programmatic compliance. The code checks the box 24/7 without fail. It can reduce errors and fraud dramatically.
Let's get into the architecture a bit, specifically this storage dilemma. This was interesting to me because we think of the internet as this infinite space, but putting data on a major blockchain is apparently very expensive and slow.
Extremely.
We can't just upload a 50-page PDF of a factory inspection to the Ethereum mainnet, right?
You absolutely could not.
Oh,
It
yeah.
would cost a small fortune in transaction fees or gas fees, and it would bloat the network. But more importantly, there's the privacy issue.
Right.
Do you really want your entire supply chain map, your pricing, your supplier contracts, visible on a public ledger for all your competitors to scrape and analyze?
Definitely not. That would be corporate suicide. So how do they solve this? The sources talk about a split, on-chain versus off-chain.
It's a hybrid model, and it's very clever. Imagine you have two buckets for your data. Bucket A is your on-chain bucket. This is for the really lightweight, high-value, critical proof points.
What goes in there?
The unique NFT ID for the product, the timestamps of key events, and something called hashes.
Okay, we need to stop and explain hashes. I see this term everywhere in crypto, and I just nod along. What is a hash in this context?
A hash is a digital fingerprint. It's a core concept in cryptography. You take any digital file, say that 50-page factory report PDF, and you run it through a cryptographic algorithm like SHA-256. It churns out a unique, fixed-length string of characters. Here's the magic part. If you change a single comma in that 50-page document and run it through the exact same algorithm again, the output hash changes completely and unpredictably.
So the hash is totally unique to that specific version of the document.
Yes, it proves it's that exact document down to the last byte. So here's what you do. You store the document itself in bucket B off-chain. This can be a secure cloud server, a company database, or a decentralized storage system like IPFS. You keep the file private, but you take the hash of that file, that small digital fingerprint, and you store that on-chain.
I see where this is going.
So if an auditor comes along 5 years later and says, show me the safety report for this product from January 2026,
Yeah.
you give them the PDF file from your private server.
It's in the off-chain bucket.
Right. They then run the hashing algorithm on the file you gave them. They get a hash. Then they look up the product's passport on the public blockchain and compare the hash they just generated to the hash that was stored on-chain back in 2026.
And if they match?
If they match, they know with 100% mathematical certainty that this is the original file and it hasn't been doctored, edited, or swapped out in the intervening 5 years.
That is brilliant. It's a bit like a zero-knowledge proof. You prove the integrity of the data without necessarily exposing the data itself to the entire world on the public chain.
That's a great way to put it. It perfectly balances the need for public, trustless verification with the need for corporate privacy and efficiency.
So we have the tech, we have the why. Now let's talk about the hammer that is forcing this to happen, the regulatory landscape. The sources call this the why now signals, and it seems like all roads lead to Brussels.
The European Union is absolutely the driver here. Anyone in global manufacturing will tell you about the Brussels effect.
Brussels effect.
Because the EU market is so massive and so wealthy, when they set a high standard for products, global manufacturers have to adopt it for everyone. You aren't going to make one version of a shirt for France and a different, lower standard version for the US. It's not efficient.
You just upgrade your whole production line to meet the EU standards because that's the highest common denominator.
Exactly. So what the EU decides becomes the de facto global standard.
So let's wade through the alphabet soup of these regulations. The big boss seems to be ESPR. What is that?
The Eco-Design for Sustainable Products Regulation. This is the big one. It's the framework legislation that was just recently finalized. And it fundamentally changes the logic of the market. Previously, eco-design rules were for energy-using products like your washing machine or your TV with those energy rating stickers. ESPR expands that concept to almost all physical goods sold in the EU. Textiles, furniture, you name it.
And it specifically mentions the digital product passport.
It mandates it. It's not a suggestion. It states that for a product to be placed on the EU market, it must have a digital product passport that is accessible, machine-readable, and interoperable.
Wow. So that is a tectonic shift. It's a condition for market entry. If you don't have the passport, your goods get stopped at the border.
Effectively, yes. Then, layered on top of that, specifically for our fashion friends, we have the EU strategy for sustainable and circular textiles. This isn't a law itself, but it's the policy roadmap that tells you where the laws are going.
And what's the direction?
It explicitly targets fast fashion. It says, textiles placed on the EU market must be long-lived and recyclable. The DPP is the tool the regulators will use to verify those claims of longevity and recyclability.
What about GDPR? That's the big privacy law. How does that fit in? I thought GDPR was about websites tracking my clicks and cookies.
It is about personal data. And this is where DPPs get very tricky and where designers have to be careful.
How so?
If a DPP tracks the ownership history of an item, and that item is owned by a person, does the passport contain personal data?
If it says, previously owned by John Doe of 123 Main Street, that's definitely personal data.
Exactly. And here's the paradox. Blockchain is immutable. You can't delete data from it. But GDPR gives every EU citizen the right to be forgotten, which means the right to have their personal data deleted.
So you have a collision of an unstoppable force, the right to be forgotten, and an immovable object, the immutable blockchain.
You do. So the implementation is key. Most of these DPP architectures, like the one Hoken describes, are designed specifically to avoid putting personally identifiable information, or PII, on-chain.
So what do they do instead?
They might just record an anonymous event, like transfer of ownership occurred on this date, without recording the name of the owner. Or the personal data lives off-chain in a private, centralized server that can be deleted upon request, while the token on-chain just remains anonymous.
Clever. They're engineering a solution around the legal problem.
They have to. Then you have things like REACH. This is an older one, right?
Yes, REACH regulates chemicals, and it's been around for a while, but the DPP gives it new teeth. REACH requires the declaration of substances of very high concern, or SVHCs. If your waterproof jacket uses a specific toxic PFAS chemical, that information must be in the passport. That way, recyclers at the end of the product's life know not to mix it in with safe plastics. It ensures a clean recycling stream. And finally, the marketing regulations. The source mentions the Green Claims Directive. This sounds like the anti-greenwashing law.
This is the one that marketing departments all over the world are panicking about. The EU is basically saying the party is over for vague environmental claims. You can't just put a green leaf sticker on something and call it eco-friendly.
That word means nothing.
It's illegal fluff now, or it will be soon.
Yeah.
If you make a claim like made with 50% less water, you must substantiate it with a verifiable life cycle assessment. The DPP is the natural container for that substantiation.
It's putting a citation needed tag on every billboard and every hang tag.
That's a great way to put it. It forces marketing to be backed by science and data.
So we have the tech, we have the laws. Now, Section 6, implementation. If I'm a brand manager listening to this and I've stopped hyperventilating in a corner,
Shuckles.
where do I actually start? This seems impossibly huge. The sources map out a pretty clear roadmap, though.
It is a big project, but you can break it down. The first step is a strategic choice. You have to define the unit.
What do you mean by the unit?
Are you doing item-level tracking or are you doing batch-level tracking?
What's the trade-off there?
Item level means every single T-shirt gets its own unique digital soul. Serial number 001000003. This is the gold standard. It's fantastic for luxury, for anti-counterfeit, for high consumer engagement, but it's operationally heavy. You have to physically tag every single item coming off the line.
And batch level.
The batch level is more like this lot of 5,000 blue t-shirts is all made in June at this factory.
Uh,
It's much easier to implement. You just need one data set for the whole batch. It's cheaper, it's good for basic compliance, but it doesn't solve the counterfeit problem as well. If I fake one shirt from that batch, it's harder to spot the fake.
So a luxury brand like Hermes would need to do item level, but maybe a fast fashion brand could start with batch level.
Generally, yes. Though the long-term goal for the circular economy is item level for everything. Step 2, choosing the carrier. This is the physical link.
The thing the consumer actually interacts with.
Right, the trigger. Is it a high-quality QR code on the care label? Is it an NFC chip embedded in the cuff of the sleeve? Hoken text material emphasizes that this needs to be durable and permanent. If the QR code washes off after 10 cycles, the passport is dead. The link is broken.
A passport is useless if you lose it. The carrier has to last as long as the garment.
Exactly. Then you have step 3, on versus off-chain data decisions, which we've covered in detail. And then step 4, which is maybe the hardest part, governance.
And this sounds like the human problem.
This is 100% the human problem.
Mhm.
Who gets permission to write to the passport? Just the brand. Do you give your main supplier writing rights? What about their suppliers? Who invites them to the system? Who verifies their data? You have to build a digital ecosystem and a set of rules for your entire supply chain.
That sounds like a diplomatic nightmare. Convincing a small dye house 3 tiers down your supply chain to log into your system and upload documents.
It is a massive change management challenge.
Yeah.
But the way brands are doing it is by making it a condition of their contracts. If you want to keep selling to us in 2026, you have to be part of our DPP system.
The golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules.
Pretty much. And finally, step 5 is UX design, the user experience. The source notes emphasize that different users need totally different views of the same data.
This is crucial. If a consumer scans the QR code in a store, they don't want a 30-page chemical analysis spreadsheet.
No. They want to see green checkmark, authentic, made in Italy, and maybe a cool video of the artisan who stitched it. They need clarity in 3 seconds.
But if a customs officer at the Port of Rotterdam scans it,
They do want the spreadsheet. They need the deep data on tariffs, compliance, and chemical safety. And a recycler needs the material composition data. So the DPP interface has to be adaptive. It's one key that opens multiple different doors depending on who is turning it.
it's fascinating that Hoken Tech actually has a live test environment for this. It's not just theory. They have a demo where you can scan a code and see the green check mark and the simple consumer view.
It makes it tangible. Once you see it working, scan the code, see the history pop up on your phone, it clicks. Oh, this is just a browser for the object. It demystifies it.
So let's try and summarize this whole thing. We are moving from an era of, trust me, bro, marketing, to an era of, here is the cryptographic proof.
That's the headline. The benefits are clear. We address the counterfeit crisis. We break down those expensive data silos. We automate a huge chunk of regulatory compliance. And we finally enable a true, scalable, circular economy.
And we finally answer that nagging question that keeps you up at night after an online purchase. Is this real?
We restore trust in the physical world by anchoring it to the verifiable truth of the digital world.
I want to leave our listeners with a thought, a bit of a provocation to chew on as we wrap up. We've painted a pretty rosy picture of transparency and verification, but as I was reading all this, I started wondering about the flip side.
The unintended consequences.
Exactly. If we are moving toward a world where every legitimate, high-quality, ethically made product has a digital passport, what happens to the products that don't?
That is the billion-dollar or maybe trillion-dollar question.
Imagine it's 2030. You're on a resale site. There are 2 identical-looking vintage jackets for sale. One has a glowing, verifiable digital passport proving it's authentic, where it was made, its material composition, its repair history. The other has nothing. It's just a jacket.
The one without the passport becomes a pariah. It's immediately suspect.
Does it become undocumented? Does the lack of a digital passport become an implicit signal of illegitimacy or poor quality, or that it was made in a sweatshop?
I think we will almost certainly see a bifurcation of the market, a split. You will have the verified economy goods that retain their value, can be easily resold, repaired, and traded because they have a rich data asset attached to them.
And the other side?
And then you will have the ghost economy, a vast market of unverified, untrusted, disposable junk that goes straight from the first owner to the landfill because no one trusts it enough to buy it used, and no recycler knows what's in it enough to process it.
Ghost goods. That is a haunting concept. If data is the new source of value, then a lack of data becomes a signal of worthlessness.
It is radical transparency, and transparency by definition casts a shadow. It cuts both ways. If you can't be seen and verified in this new system, you might as well not exist in the value chain.
On that slightly dystopian but also kind of hopeful note, check your labels, look for those QR codes, and start asking yourself, do you know where your stuff really comes from?
Always worth asking.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you in the next one.